Good morning! Unless it's not. You ever think that life is too tough? I'm starting to think that maybe the game wasn't balanced to a player of my skill level. While I take the time to switch over to easy mode, I thought it'd be fun to take a look at some video games to see how they handle this kind of thing. For example, Cuphead balances itself by allowing players to shut the game off if they can't beat the tutorial. Is that reference too dated? But just having a few different difficulties to choose from is boring. Games are truly fun when you don't even know that the different difficulties exist.
Difficulty has been a major topic of video games since they've existed. From trying to make them harder to suck down quarters at arcades, to making them easier and more approachable to more people, difficulty mostly seems to be about the money. After all, if more people can beat your game, more people will probably buy it. Sometimes.
Without having played a game before, it can be really hard to decide what difficulty I should be playing on. I don't know how hard it's going to be. Luckily, some games started to be a bit more clever about this.
Dynamic difficulty adjustment is the result of someone claiming video games were too hard. Making the sequel easier would possibly alienate some of the fans, so developers needed a workaround to make the game easier, but only for worse players. Of course, considering this was back in the late 90s, games weren't exactly advanced.
Mostly because it released in 2001.
It's no secret that older games were hard, so it only makes sense that the first time games came into the mainstream was also the first time people complained.
But it won't be the last if I have anything to say about it.
Crash Bandicoot was really popular. Unfortunately, if you've ever played the original, you know it's also very hard.
Get out of here, Donkey Kong.
And people were complaining even before I was around.
Not possible.
Which led to Crash 2 introducing some of the earliest examples of dynamic difficulty adjustment. Kind of. Difficulty is already a weird topic in video games. Most often all you can really do is provide enemies with different health and damage. And well, Crash enemies are kind of like me.
We both die in one hit.
So Naughty Dog had a bit of a different idea. If you died often enough in certain sections, they would provide you with a free extra hit. Dying even more would even make more checkpoints in the level to give you a better shot at getting through. These were interesting methods, but I don't know, to me they were always kind of... what's the word?
Bad! Crash Bandicoot had limited lives, and if you had to die multiple times in order to trigger the easier mode, guess what kind of player you were? Bad!
That's one of the problems with changing difficulty. The game has to know whether or not you're bad. Luckily, modern games seem to be getting rid of life counters.
But that doesn't stop Crash 4 from making me inexplicably mad, but that's a topic for another day.
One of my favorite forms of dynamic difficulty probably comes from roguelike games. The premise of a lot of these games is that you're going to die and have to start over. But each time, you have some small upgrades to buy that make it easier to progress next time. I'm not entirely sure this counts as dynamic difficulty.
You're a monster!
But I always felt the game Hades had perfect balance for me. It took me a good handful of tries to get through the final boss once, and from what I've heard, some people did it way faster and some even did it slower than I did. That's how it should work if it works well, because even though we had different times, we all felt like we could make it with practice and upgrades. But there's one game that really stands out to me for how well it manages this concept.
No, not you. You already get way too much screen time. Yes, I know you're popular, but that's not an excuse. I'm done with you. Sorry about that, guys. The game I actually want to talk about is Left 4 Dead 2.
While this game is most notable for me due to the modding community, maybe that's exactly the point. I'm not sure many players would really notice all the work this game does to keep the difficulty balanced, no matter who's playing. The game has its own little management system that they labeled the Director, that's supposed to help you feel like you're swarmed in an apocalypse.
Cut, Tank, come on, man. You can't keep missing your cue like that.
The tasks it manages are all very subtle and all depend on how well the players are doing. It can increase the amount of zombies, change the types of specials, take away pickups, and even alter the path.
With just how much is working behind the scenes here, it almost makes me feel like speedrunners could get through the game faster if they played it badly.
To me, this is the masterclass of dynamic difficulty. I mean, I bet most players chalked a lot of these things up to RNG, but apparently it's all based on how bad you are.
Haha, loser!
This is one of the hardest working dynamic difficulties in gaming, all to keep a simple horde shooter feeling as tight as possible.
Well, at least now I know that my life doesn't have dynamic difficulty, or if it does, I don't think I've triggered it yet. But it can be nice to escape into a video game that does all the extra work for me. And who knows, maybe there's a director out there somewhere just waiting for me to get good at the game so it can send a bunch of zombies at me.